Hi, I'm Dr. Chandrika Gibson, and I'm here with Satyam Brown. And today we're going to be chatting about this very hot topic of political polarisation and the impact that the media and the news cycle has on people's mental health.
So we thought this would be a really good topic to discuss because obviously it's what we're all being exposed to, mostly on social media. And the other day we were discussing about the impact of mental health. I've been having lots of clients presenting, talking about this topic in particular and how it adds to their anxiety of the day-to-day living experience. So I've got a nice little definition here of what political polarisation is. It refers to the growing ideological distance between political parties and their supporters. It can lead to a divided society where individuals see those with opposing views as enemies rather than fellow citizens. And when we live in a world where we perceive some of the other people living in the world as enemies, that obviously changes our experience. And we all have our own history around having either real enemies or the concepts of enemies and being threatened and feeling unsafe. So I thought it was a really good idea to have a quick chat about this, about what we can do about it, what it is, what we can do about it, and how can we manage that within ourselves from the perspective of a counsellor and the perspective of a yoga therapist and yoga teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I see it very much playing out amongst my clients and students as well. I think that whether you're reading newspapers or watching TV news or whether you're a social media user, which not everybody is, and maybe that's one of the strategies is, how you put boundaries around your consumption. But I definitely see that people are looking for reassurance that it's safe to be themselves. And that's not really what they're finding if they're following the conventional kind of media channels. They're starting to feel all of this sort of identity politics. And although we in Australia are not necessarily having that same kind of election cycle, the US has a big influence on our culture and the conversations that are kind of there in the zeitgeist. So the way that I view it is, how do we help people feel like they're safe in themselves? And we can't ever guarantee anybody's sense of safety, but we are endeavouring at Surya Health to create a kind of culture and a community and a space where people can let down their defences, let down the ego identity, because this is really what, the philosophy of yoga teaches, is that we're not separate. We're actually really deeply connected to one another and interconnected as well. You can think about that in an ecological sense even, that our actions influence everybody else's realities. And so we want to live in a harmonious society.
And in some way that desire and need is part of the problem. So, maybe a good place to start is where this is coming from. So media is a big cause of all of this. And because of social media, and we have news feeds constantly on our phones and iPads and things, and those of you that still watch commercial TV, we're exposed to all of this stuff. And obviously what media is doing, or the goal from media's point of view, is to get views in order to gain profit and power. So, and then what happens is, what's the ultimate way to do that? Well, it's through the algorithm. So the more things that you click on, it starts to learn about who you are, the way that you perceive what you're interested in, and it will just keep drip feeding you that perspective. And then what happens is, the more sensational that the headlines are, the more it will draw you in, and the more opposing and the more threatening and fear-based that these articles and items and discussions are, the more you can't look away. It's a natural aspect of our awareness, is that we are dialed in to potential threat. So we're very fixated on, am I at risk? So what does media do? What do the algorithms do? They play on fear, the concept of and the psychology of fear.
And would you say, Satyam, that our nervous systems can't really tell the difference between what is a genuine threat in our environment and what is coming to us through our devices?
Yeah, so reality, what's reality? So it all comes down to perception. And so this is another really interesting aspect to it, and that is the more fearful that you are, the more you need to look and learn more. And the more you feed into the algorithm, the more it learns about you. And then what happens then is that you're not going outside to go for a walk. You're not doing these things. You end up in a kind of an echo chamber as well, because the algorithm's just feeding you what you believe. So then you naturally think that I believe this and there's people out there that don't, or whatever that the news items or whatever are telling you. So the more afraid you are, the more you'll digest, the more you'll sit on the couch on your device, and the less you'll actually go out and engage with society to have a personal connection, to see, to connect with people. And this is a really important aspect of some of the strategies we'll talk about later as well. Yeah. So psychologically, there's some really interesting things that come into play too. One is cognitive dissonance, because I think most of us have a view that in order for a community or a relationship to work well, that we're all entitled to our opinions. But if you have the media sensationalizing and fear-mongering, then what happens is we have this cognitive dissonance where I have this particular belief that everyone should be heard, but then I can go into, but I don't want those people that are trying to destroy the planet or destroy democracy or whatever the narrative is, I don't want them to have a say. And then it creates this inner conflict between these kind of two beliefs of what I feel is right versus trying to avoid what is wrong. Yes. What's your experience of the cognitive dissonance with that?
Yeah, I think I experienced that cognitive dissonance because I also think I want everyone to be heard, and I would like to understand everyone and see their different perspectives. But there are certain perspectives that push my buttons, that give me a reaction, that make me feel unsafe, and that make me feel like I want to shut that down, or I want to avoid that, or I'd rather not hear that. So I think that's where the kind of tribalism comes in, that people feel much more comfortable when what they're hearing around them reflects their own inner sense of how the world is. So then we wind up, only associating with people who agree with us. And that can be really problematic, particularly because it decreases our empathy. And as mental health professionals, which we both are in different ways, I mean, heart and the soul. And so I want to always sit in a place of non-judgment and total radical acceptance of where my clients and students are coming from. And yet I'm still influenced by this polarization that is out there and surrounds us. And I let in to my consciousness quite willingly because, like most people, I think I get a little bit of a dopamine hit from the news cycle. And as you said before, it's about safety too. I want to know what's happening out there. If there's a riot about to break out down the street, I want to know about it. So I'm watching those news feeds. I'm influenced by them. And it creates this real dissonance, this real tension in me between who I feel that I am in my heart, which is open and accepting, and then the kind of interactions that might happen online, which are very, aggressive and distinctly polarized and in their tribal kind of mentality.
It's interesting because, how often have you had a riot down the street? I'm sure there are people that have had that direct experience, but we haven't. I've known of one riot my whole life in 53 years that I've seen happen outside my door. So, and interestingly, that was political back in the 90s. And you're quite right. We, if you think about most of your peer group, they are aligned with your ideas. It's pretty rare. I think it's more common when we're younger, but as we age, we especially align ourselves with people that think in a similar way to us. It's great to be challenged. but we actually don't like that. It's exhausting. So we tend not to surround ourselves with people that challenge us all the time, especially if that's a part of your natural day-to-day job. You're dealing with clients or customers, disgruntled people, or much like family, we can't choose necessarily who our peers are, who we work with, and we can have those differing kind of views that trigger us all the time. So then when it comes to our social life and we have more choice, then we choose to expose ourselves to people that have those similar views. And this is another thing that happens. So there's a thing called social identity theory, where, of course, we like to feel aligned. We need to belong to a group. It's where we feel safer in our groups. That's how human beings originated as nomadic tribes. So it's still very much part of our nervous system, that aspect of it. And what we fear is to be ejected by or rejected by our group, because back in the day, our ancestors, that would have meant death. You can't survive in that harsh environment on your own. And that's why our nervous systems respond so intensely to even the threat of rejection. And if the kind of identity, social identity that we have towards our group is political based, then it's very easy to other the other, because there's this whole structure there in the media and in society where we can do that quite easily. And then it can spread out into things like people from different cultures, countries, race, etc., and things like that, which is quite sad. So solutions. So what are some creative solutions to deal with this?
Well, look, I think, first of all, do minimize the diet of what you're taking in. Like, we do make choices about what we consume. And although the algorithm is powerful and that dopamine hit is very tangible, it feels satisfying in a certain way, I think we do need to put some limits around that for ourselves. And as you said, go out into nature. Nature is a wonderful kind of equalizer, and it shows those cycles of life, and it shows us in real time how you can coexist with diversity. And in fact, diversity is such a strength in natural ecosystems. So being out in nature, depending where you live, is likely to bring you in contact with other human beings and other species. And so that is also really important, I think, to start to connect in ways that are offline and slow and real and compassionate, because we might still find some clash. We might still find that we don't align or there's misattunement with the people that we interact with. But we need to keep exercising our nervous system to have a window of tolerance. And that's a window of tolerance in the personal and in the collective, that there's space for difference and space for different ideas.
Yeah. And one of the ways that's really good is to understand how people got to the position from which they perceive from or identify with. If you knew, say, for example, there's someone that has a completely different political view to you, but when they sat down and they discussed with you their upbringing, their fears, their anxieties, why they are perceiving things the way they are, then you can have a more empathetic or compassionate understanding of, that makes sense that your fears are this or that. And I can see more clearly. So, going deeper into the reasons why someone's feeling and thinking that way is something that the media just doesn't do. So having that personal connection and kind of empathy, engagement with people where we actually ask, those deeper questions. And I think this is something that gets lost in society anyway. We're not very good these days about connecting on that more deeper level. A lot of people are afraid to ask people about their backgrounds or upbringings, or, what are you afraid of? Kind of questions. As a therapist, that's always my go-to, one of my favorite questions. And then, I think as well, you can do a similar thing through art and through storytelling, through writing, painting, drawing, dance, like whatever. contributing to those type things in society. I mean, traditionally, that's always been the way. And whenever there's been political upheaval, something we always comment or often comment on when we chat about this is some of the best eras of political polarization caused some of the best music, like the 60s and the 70s and the 90s grunge movement and all of that, so a lot of, fascinating artistic expression comes out of these times when people feel trapped by the narrative. But one of my favorite things that I encourage people to do to break this kind of thing is two simple things. One is, if you're feeling lonely and isolated, then when you feel safe to smile at people on the street, and not as in a way of, and I want them to smile back, so not with the expectation, but as a gift. I'm just going to smile, give a nice, pleasant smile, and that naturally makes you feel connected. And the other thing is volunteering. The more that we volunteer, it breaks down the power that media has to tell us who our society is, what our place is within that, and what we are to be afraid of. When you have personal connections with people, when you're pulling together for, say, I don't know, doing something, caring for the local environment in a beautiful park, which we have lots around us. There's friends of this park and friends of that park, where you get to plant things or pick up rubbish, or other things, volunteering for different charities, which, we've done a lot of over the years as well, at different cancer charities and worked in them, and fundraising. There's really beautiful ways we can all pull together regardless of our political views.
Yeah, and there's things that are free and things where you give more than you take. And I think that just sparked off in me a memory of that wonderful quote. I think Brené Brown is known for it. It might not be hers originally, about contributing more than you criticize. And so I think you're right, to break that pattern of being kind of an online warrior and saying things from behind the safety of a screen, to actually be in your community and actively working for the betterment. So things that you care about, you can still be driven by that passion, but instead of it being about the negative, it can become constructive. And I think that also you touched on, the expression through your face, and that made me think of the polyvagal theory. And this is something that it's a lens that I look through quite a lot with my yoga therapy clients, is, within the individual's body, how are they expressing? Where is all the nervous tension? Where is all the nervous system information flowing? And when you can come into this sort of sense of feeling socially safe and connected, then you can express yourself. And that expression often comes through the face. So you can almost kind of hack the system by smiling first and trick your body into feeling safer. And that's very similar to what we do at the start of a yoga practice. I know that people come into their practice with all kinds of stuff going on in their minds and in their bodies and in their lives. And if we start with the breath and we start with anchoring our awareness to deeper diaphragmatic breathing, that also is a way to kind of hack your nervous system and tell your body, tell your brainstem, I must be safe because I'm breathing deeply. I'm not panicking here. I'm not having quick, shallow breaths. I'm breathing slow and deep, and that just shifts the way that your mind is working, and it lets you let go of some of those ego identity stories that separate us, so we can get to the heart of yoga, meaning connection with self, connection with others, connection with something bigger than these separation ideas.
Yeah. And of course, meditation, mindfulness, these are all great things where we're stepping out of the stories. If you really think about it, the narratives that we tell ourselves, the narratives that we're fed from our parents growing up and from society in general and any other source of influence, are often the cause of a lot of our suffering. So when you have a little break from the narratives by just doing mindfulness, focusing on the present moment beyond the thinking, having regular meditation sessions where you can experience yourself in a state of being doing very little, but experiencing so much beyond the narratives. They're a great little reality check. And I think gives you the ability to see the play that's going on between the influences, the stories, and the media and things like that as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we finish up?
I think that's really, it sums it up, that you can change the stories that you tell yourself by creating stories for yourself, and also to get to that kind of refreshing and reframing, it requires a bit of a break. So breaking up the news feed, getting outside, connecting with people or nature, maybe seeking support if that's what you need, if you need to kind of work through these things and debrief the issues that they bring up. But ultimately, inside yourself, you can come home to that safety and reframe things, regenerate and renew your nervous system patterns, so that you can recognize that beneath the sense of separation, beneath the apparent duality, there might exist a kind of oneness and interconnectedness that feels much better to us as human beings.
Yes, wonderful. So we all have choice. So, and, if you're noticing that you're feeling more distressed than normal, have a look at your influences, what's happening, what's feeding into your system of who you are, and you have choice to change that. You add into the mix, change the recipe. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.